We are going to be reading this morning from the 28th chapter of Matthew. You can find this on page 706 of your pew Bibles, or you can follow along on the screen. Let's listen to God's Word together. After the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you." The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know..." So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them. "Greetings," he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." While the women were on their way, some of the guards went into the city and reported to the chief priests everything that had happened. When the chief priests had met with the elders and devised a plan, they gave the soldiers a large sum of money, telling them, "You are to say, his disciples came during the night and stole him away while we were asleep. If this report gets to the governor, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble." So the soldiers took the money and did as they were instructed. And this story has been widely circulated among the Jews to this very day. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age." Please pray. God, we thank you for your word. Lord, we thank you for the story that your word tells throughout, from Genesis to Revelation. But God, we are especially thankful for this part of the story. Lord, this most amazing chapter in the story of your salvation of the world, in which your Son accomplished the unthinkable, in which your power was on full display, in which your goodness and your love and your mercy were unmistakably evident. So God, help us as we reflect on your word this morning, as we celebrate the reality that your word describes. Lord, help us to have hearts and minds who believe, hearts and minds that cling to the good news that you have declared. Lord, help us to be shaped and formed by this story, by these words, that we might live to the glory of your name. It's in the name of your Son, Jesus, that we pray these things. Amen. In John chapter 3, in the midst of his famous conversation with Nicodemus, the Pharisee who wants to know more about just who this wonder-working carpenter's son from Nazareth is, Jesus utters the profound and puzzling statement, "The wind blows where it pleases. You hear its sound, but you can't tell where it comes from or where it is going." Jesus uses this powerful metaphor to describe the work of God's Spirit. But this is a declaration that comes to mind whenever I come up against a theological reality, whenever I come up against a truth about God and his kingdom that is kind of tough to wrap my head around. And one such reality is at the heart of our worship today. It's at the heart of our worship every day, in fact, but it hangs especially heavy over this morning's gathering. I'm talking about the resurrection. Comprehending resurrection, like so much that is truly life-changing, is no easy order. For every understanding that we think we have, 100 potential misunderstandings rise up to take its place. So at the end of the day, we're left wondering if what we're talking about is even worthy of the designation, or if we're still a million miles away from what God has accomplished and what God continues to do in this powerful work of resurrection. This morning in Sunday school, Joe did a good job of exploring some of the various meanings of resurrection as encountered by God's people, and some of the challenges to believing in the resurrection that we encounter throughout the millennia. And one of the things that we got at in that discussion is that this is a complex and multidimensional idea. But even if we can't quite nail the resurrection down, even if, like the wind, we can't always tell where it's coming from or where it's going, we can hear its sound echoing through the ages. We can see its results in the way it transforms not just our vision of life and death and everything, but maybe even more concretely in the ways that it has transformed the experiences and the expressions of so many others. Specifically, we can look at some of the ways that the resurrection has impacted the people of God, those who have entrusted themselves to the promises and purposes of their Creator, as well as how it has impacted or failed to impact those who continue to keep God at arm's length. And we can start by looking at the experiences of those who saw it first. We can explore through the gospel narrative how the resurrection of Jesus Christ on that first Easter Sunday almost 2,000 years ago shaped the realities of those who initially witnessed it. So let's begin with the women who went to the tomb early in the morning on that day after the Sabbath. They made their way to the garden where Jesus was buried in those moments when the sun had just broken on the horizon. And they did this because they loved Jesus. They went because they cared for Jesus. When Jesus had been suddenly arrested, when he had been unjustly tried, when he had been violently nailed to the cross, something in these women had been wounded. They must have felt like their hearts had been ripped out. We all know what it feels like to lose someone we love. We want to do something. We want to do anything to fill the time, to show our grief in some meaningful way, to make it clear that even though this person has died, our love for them will endure. And so we pay our respects. We do this in a variety of ways, maybe by writing eulogies or poems, by making food or planting flowers, by using our words and our actions in a variety of expressions that seek to make sense of what has happened, even though we know that that's impossible to do. For the women who came to the tomb that morning, we can acknowledge that their outpouring of grief and love was manifest in preparing the body of Jesus for its rest. Matthew writes that they came to look at the tomb, but in other gospel accounts we read that they had come to anoint Jesus' body. There was an elaborate ritual involved in the work of laying someone in the tomb, a tradition that involved spices and oils and preservatives that were the stock in trade of those who cared for the dead. And it's quite possible that Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus and the others who had prepared Jesus' body in haste on that Good Friday evening as the Sabbath was approaching hadn't been able to carry out the ritual to its completion. And so when these women came to the tomb that morning, this wasn't just a matter of custom. It wasn't just a matter of propriety. It was a matter of faithfulness. To have a body not properly buried, to have respect not properly paid to the deceased, even when the deceased had been executed. This was seen as a defilement, not just of the corpse, but a defilement of the land itself. So these women came to the tomb on that morning to honor Jesus, the rabbi and friend whom they had loved. But also they came to honor the laws of God that gave shape to their lives and to the life of their community. But even as they drew near, it's hard to imagine what was going through their minds. They were still certainly overcome with emotion. And according to Mark's gospel, they were struggling with whether they were up to this awesome task. Mark records that they asked one another, "Who will roll the stone away from the tomb?" They have the desire to honor Jesus' remains, but they question whether they have the ability to do what is required of them. But they go anyway, perhaps trusting that God will provide a way. And God does provide a way in dramatic fashion. God makes his powerful presence known at this place of death and grief. God sends a violent earthquake and an angel who definitively answers the women's questions about who will roll the stone away. And then the angel speaks to them. Do not be afraid, he says. He goes on to tell them about this amazing thing that has happened. Jesus isn't here. He has risen, just as he said. Even beyond that, the angel gives them a job to do. He tells them to go and to tell the disciples, to proclaim the resurrection to Jesus' followers, a group of men who hadn't shown up at the tomb that morning. He gives these women the job of becoming the first witnesses, the first missionaries even, of this kingdom of life that God had established on that first Easter. And in that moment, the power of the resurrection enters into the lives of these faithful women. It begins to drive out their fear, to drive out their grief, to drive out the questions they might have about their own courage or their own capabilities. Because if Jesus is alive, if an angel opens the tomb and tells them not to fear, then they can rest in the knowledge that despite what their culture or their neighbors or their families or even that little nagging voice in the back of their heads tells them, they are worth something. They are important to the God who conquered the grave. They have an important part to play in what God is doing. And so they run away. Their fear is mingling with a new sensation, one they certainly hadn't expected on that morning. It's joy. Another group of people that were certainly impacted by the events of that first Easter stand at the other end of the spectrum from the women, in terms of status, in terms of the world's estimation of them. See, if the women had been told at various points in their lives that they were second-rate, the soldiers who were commissioned by Pilate to stand guard at the tomb had probably been told just the opposite. Among the armies of the ancient world, the Romans prided themselves on being the toughest, meanest kids on the block. The mythology surrounding this elite group was bound up with the idea that they had conquered the known world because of their commitment to doing the hard thing, because of their courage in the face of fear, because of their ability to stare down any challenge and to emerge triumphant on the other side. If anything, this task, spending a few days in a garden, keeping watch by the grave of a Nazarene, this probably seemed beneath them. Something like a little vacation, a way to break the monotony of barracks life and pass the time until they were called into real action. But if this is what the soldiers were expecting, then they couldn't have been more wrong. Because if the earthquake on that Easter morning served to announce the angel's presence, it also served to scare those Roman guards right out of their breastplates. Matthew writes that they shook and became like dead men. This is such an ironic moment. The angel who comes to proclaim life for those who are dead causes those who are living to take on the appearance of death. In other words, for the soldiers, no less than for the women, this event turned the world upside down. It's almost as though God was fulfilling the prophecy that Mary herself had made in Luke chapter 2, when she sang of her joy at conceiving the Christ child. When she had uttered those triumphant words, "He has brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble." Mary might not have completely understood what that image was getting at, but Easter morning provides a pretty clear picture of what God was accomplishing. These soldiers, who occupied the highest realms, who moved in the most influential circles of Greco-Roman society, were reduced to blubbering idiots. To me, this is a signal that the resurrection had the power to upend the old order of things, to set life on an entirely new course, in which the corrupt and death-dealing institutions of the kingdoms and principalities of this world don't have the hold on reality that they think they have, in which God's claim to power is the one that reigns supreme. Now, to be sure, these soldiers and the authorities they answered to didn't go quietly. We see this in the way that the chief priests bribed them to circulate a story that explains away what had happened at the tomb. We see it in the efforts of the temple authorities and the Roman government to squash the accounts of Jesus' resurrection in the early years of the church. Those who rule this world will make every effort to keep the coming kingdom at arm's length. This continues today, of course. But the resurrection demonstrates that the movement of God's purposes will not be subdued, no matter how many soldiers line up to resist him. And then there are the disciples, the 12, now 11, who have gathered behind locked doors in the wake of Jesus' arrest and crucifixion. This group, who have traveled the hills of Judea and the seashores of Galilee, listening to Jesus and watching Jesus and learning from Jesus, only to abandon Jesus in the moment when he most needed them by his side. What could the resurrection mean to them? Well, surely they would find themselves on the receiving end of one of the harshest rebukes that Jesus had ever dealt out. They would have certainly deserved that. They would have had to forgive Jesus for coming back from the grave just to say, "I told you so," and then shaking the dust off his feet as he walked away to go find some more worthy followers. But as we know, that's not what happened. We read in Matthew's gospel that the women instructed the disciples to go to a mountain in Galilee where they would see Jesus. And so they went. And when Jesus appeared to them, his first words were not an exasperated reprimand, not frustrated chastisement, not even an affectionate, "you of little faith." At least according to 3 of the 4 Gospels, Jesus' first words to his disciples after returning from the grave were words of encouragement, words of peace, words of comfort. Here in Matthew, they are words in which he assures his disciples of 3 things. First, he stands before them as one who has authority, one who has overcome death, one who therefore occupies the rightful position of the ruler of heaven and earth. Second, he tells them that he has a job for them to do. They are to go and to tell the nations. They are to go out and to share with the citizens of this broken world what they have seen and what they have heard. They are to go out and bring new sons and daughters into the life of the kingdom and teach them what life is all about. And third, Jesus assures them that they will not be alone in this work. He tells them that he will always be with them, even to the very end of the age. That no matter where they go, no matter what they face, he will be by their side. And so Jesus takes this group of fearful fishers of men and he empowers them to carry out the message and the ministry of an eternal kingdom. And so the resurrection stands for Jesus' disciples, for this small but emboldened community, as a sort of inauguration, a commission to service that will shape their existence from that day forward. And the same is true for us. The lessons of the resurrection, as varied as they might be, are every bit as powerful and every bit as relevant as they ever were. Like the women at the tomb, we hear in the resurrection a word that lifts us up in our weakness, that empowers us to take hold of a new life despite what the world might say about us. Like the soldiers and authorities, we hear in the resurrection a word that serves as a corrective to our pride. A reminder that the kingdoms of this world, the powers of this world, the glories of this world that we grasp at, these things will not last. That striving to obtain these things or to hold on to these things will not bring life, but rather death. And like the disciples, we hear in the resurrection a word of commission. A word that tells us that despite our failures, despite our fears, despite our moments of faithlessness, God has a plan for us. God has given us authority to bear his name into the world, to share the message of his kingdom with the nations. And beyond that, God has given us the assurance that we will undertake this task as part of a community that includes our brothers and sisters in the faith, that includes the Holy Spirit, and that even includes Jesus himself, who promises to be with us to the very end of the age. Please pray. God, we thank you for this most amazing of realities that we encounter in your gospel. That the grave is not the end. Lord, Lord, that when your Son died, when he was buried, Lord, that was a prelude to this amazing thing that you were going to do. This conquering of maybe the darkest, scariest force that any of us know, death. And God, we thank you that according to your word, this reality, this resurrection was not a one-time thing, Lord, that Christ was the first fruits of the resurrection, the firstborn from the dead, Lord, who would be raised from the grave in order to show us what awaits us as well. Lord, we thank you that Jesus didn't just experience resurrection, Lord, but he was the resurrection. He is the resurrection. Lord, and that those of us who live and believe in him will live even though we die. God, such a truth is too wonderful for us. We can't comprehend it. We can embrace it. So God, that's my prayer for us this morning, that we would embrace the resurrection in our lives, that we would believe it, that we would practice it, that we would live it out. So that each day that we have on this earth, Lord, would be lived in such a way that we proclaim the glory of what you have done and what you are doing. It's in the name of your Son, Jesus, that we pray these things. Amen.